Superhero powers are waking up with a fresh new Wolverine hairdo nowadays. Of course, we all love the OG Marvel anti-hero, whether he's slashing up his enemies or recovering from atomic bombs. However, I think that we're all forgetting his most powerful weapon. His pants. I mean, even the freaking Phoenix couldn't disintegrate those bad boys. That material's gotta be tougher than adamantium. But yeah, on a more serious note, you really loved my top 10 Wolverine power demonstrations video, links in the description, so I'm back with volume 2. It's always nice to begin a list with an origin story. The Wolverine's busy beating the shit out of his bro Sabretooth, and just when it looks like he's gonna Will Smith his ass, Gambit shows up and allows Victor to make his escape. Of course, Logan ain't about peaceful living, so he faces off against the unwelcome intruder and gives him a serious run for his money. The dude tries to escape using a drop-down staircase, but that's of no use as Wolverine casually slashes it apart with his new adamantium claws. The effects team added a nice touch to the scene with the sparks, and the pacing of his attack is well done as well. No, seriously, the editing was simply just mwah. Okay, I gotta confess, I was really hyped for the Gambit movie too, but I guess Channing Tatum's already bearing the brunt of that disappointment.
That's a nice stick.
Don't do this!
Class dismissed.
Who doesn't want a brooding Australian hunk as their mutant combat teacher? Logan oozes the kind of masculinity that would even make straight guys question themselves. Not me though, I'm all about the ladies. Okay, I digress. Back to the scene in question. Logan's kind of fed up with the way his students are performing in a battle simulation, but things get worse when Storm destroys his last cigar to save him. That's when he decides it's time to show off, and he orders Colossus to just swing him into a gigantic robot. He gives us all a nice still for the camera before he absolutely demolishes the illegitimate love child between the Terminator and the Iron Giant. To top it off, the Swag Master poses next to the robot's decapitated head and says,
Class dismissed.
"Now, that's what I call a money shot." No, not that kind, you sick freaks.
Hey, Colossus. Nice throw.
Sometimes Logan likes to show off, and other times his opponents help him with it. I'm all about body positivity and stuff, but you're lying if you weren't shocked to see how massive Fred had become. But yeah, long story short, Wolverine takes him on after the giant acts like a Gen Z snowflake by getting offended when he calls him Blob. Obviously, simple punches don't do shit to his millions of layers of fat, but when the Blob tries to flex his own strength by headbutting Logan, he accidentally ends up showing us how strong his adamantium skeleton really is. The Wolverine latches onto the advantage and owns the rounded villain after that. Yeah, it's not an ideal way to put your powers on display, but hey, it made for great comic timing and further cemented Logan's status as a hardcore badass.
Now, where's Victor? Get out of my bar, freak.
It's never a good idea to get into a confrontation with the Wolverine, and 20 plus years of X-Men movies have pushed that point even further. Of course, it all started off with the OG X-Men film back in 2000, which now seems like a generation ago. Oh shit, that's a fact. Anyway, Rogue and Logan find themselves at an unfriendly bar, and the plot must move further, so a bunch of jerks try messing with them. Logan ain't standing for that kind of behavior, so he ruffles up one of the dudes and points his freaking claws at him, even while the other guy holds a gun to his head. Now, obviously, that's not going to bother him, and he ends up holding him at claw point as well. This scene shows us one of Logan's sickest superpowers of all, the ability to not give a single fuck. And for all the internet nerds who want to criticize this scene, let me just remind you of the one in X2, where he literally popped a bullet out of his own head. Yeah, watch volume 1 if you don't believe me. It's hard to find a character as ungrateful as Ichiro Yashida, but at least he gave us a decent interpretation of the Silver Samurai. Okay, that might be a hot take, but I don't care. Logan's really struggling against the adamantium giant and even gets his claws chopped off. That's when Yashida starts draining him of his healing powers, and man, he ain't looking good. Luckily, Mariko intervenes, but the real flex is when Logan is still able to take down the Silver Samurai, even after having most of his powers drained. And yeah, I know regrowing those bone claws raised a lot of eyebrows, but I really wanted to see Yashida die, and if that's what it took, then so be it. I know that sounds super sus, but don't worry, I'm not going to turn into a purple titan hell-bent on killing half the universe. Or am I? Okay, I know he doesn't come out on top in this battle, but man, that dude can sure take a hell lot of damage. The Black Ninja Clan does their best to stop Logan, but they clearly haven't seen any of the X-Men movies, so they don't know what's in store for them. The Wolverine continues to take damage as he kills the warriors one by one and even absorbs a tanker explosion in the process. Yet Hugh Jackman looks good regardless of whether he's kicking ass or having his own ass kicked. The scene ends with Logan finally dropping down after being loaded with poisonous arrows, but dude, just look at the number of arrows. It's insane to consider that it took that much poison to knock him out for a little nap, and that's a true show of dominance if you ask me. The movie Logan really showed us Wolverine at his weakest, and yet we still managed to see some super powerful demonstrations. The writers knew the audience would have wanted at least one proper rage scene, so we got this gem. After injecting himself with the booster serum, the Wolverine awakens and goes absolutely hammer and tongs at the Reavers. It's such a supercharged display of power as he relentlessly slashes through a bunch of soldiers while letting out his iconic grunts. Lara and the other kid mutants also join in to help the closest dude they have to a father figure, and that only adds on to the awesomeness of the whole sequence. Sadly, the effects of the serum wear off soon after, and Logan's reduced to a crippled mutant once again. But man, we really needed that moment in this movie. Take a bow, Hugh Jackman. You truly are a modern-day legend. I've got a lot of thoughts on X-Men Apocalypse, and Wolverine's little Weapon X cameo is easily my most positive one. After Jean Grey and Scott Summers realise that their only way out of the tricky situation is to provide some fan service, they go ahead and free the one and only Wolverine who's being held captive in Stryker's secret hideout. The dude's obviously pissed and confused, considering his memories are in a mush, so he slashes through Stryker's men like he's slicing up some vegetables for his spaghetti and meatballs. Luckily, his rage doesn't extend to the kids as Jean restores some of his primary memories, so he leaves them alone and wanders off into another franchise plot hole. Yeah, I don't think there's any point criticizing the movie anymore. I was just happy to see Logan in action again. Volume 1 might have covered Charles Xavier's more memorable seizure, but let's not forget how sudden the first one was. Logan and Professor X are having a pretty rough argument, and while it might not be the kind of stuff you'd expect to see in an X-Men film, what followed really took us all by surprise. Charles experiences a seizure and everyone is brought down to their knees by the sheer force of his powers. Luckily, Logan's healing abilities can allow him to fight through the psychic waves and inject Charles with his medicine to calm him down. Mind you, this was when our hero wasn't even 50% of his original powers, so it just goes on to show how strong his healing really is.
When I found you, you were pursuing a career as a cage fighter. You were an animal.
This is an emotional one, and that's why it lands the top spot on this list. After Magneto's plans are foiled by Cyclops' lasers and Wolverine's claws, Rogue suffers a lot of damage and is on the verge of dying. But Logan ain't about to let that happen, so he gives her a nice warm hug as if he's a big old teddy bear or something. The only difference here is that he allows her to absorb his powers and heal herself from her injuries. That's sweet and all, but it also means that Logan becomes susceptible to all the damage he took earlier, especially from that whooping he received at the hands of Sabretooth. Once again, we learn that he's way too loaded on the recovery factor, and he's still able to survive even after having a huge chunk of his powers taken away from him. It's like he made the ultimate sacrifice and still had enough juice to stay alive. Of course, this was going to be the top pick.
I think she's a little taken with you.
Well, you can tell her my heart belongs to someone else.
So that was volume 2 of my top 10 Wolverine power demonstrations. Please like, share, subscribe, and check out the description for links to my Discord and Patreon. And while you're at it, click the card on your top right to check out my playlist. I'll see you next time on the TV Regions.